Hey everyone, it's John Literal. Today is June the 9th, 2025, and I just want to announce that my recent book has been published and it's available in print, Kindle, and I also provide it for free on archive.org. And this book is my latest translation of an early church father's Bible commentary. It's a church father by the name of Oecumenius from the 6th and 7th century. He wrote commentaries on the Bible on just about the whole New Testament. Prior to this, the only English translation of any commentaries by Oecumenius has been on the book of Revelation. And it's been out for a couple decades now. But there hasn't been any other translations of the rest of his Bible commentaries. So I'm working on that. I do plan to at least translate all the general epistles that he wrote commentaries on. He wrote them on all, he wrote on commentaries on James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and the book of Jude. And so I plan to at least finish those and perhaps maybe start in on his commentaries on Paul's epistles, which would take quite a while because we're talking, the book of Romans all the way through to 2nd Timothy. And so that would take a while. And even the book of Hebrews, because he also wrote on Hebrews, which most of the traditional writers from the early church fathers thought that Paul wrote the book of Hebrews. And this day and time, it's uncertain who did. There's doubt that Paul actually wrote it himself, at least wrote it by hand. There is the theory that Paul is the author of it, but somebody wrote for Paul. Paul would say what he wanted to be written, and he'd have a scribe write down what he had to say. That's, we don't know. We don't know who it is. There's all kinds of theories out there on who the actual author was. Some think that could be Clement, who wrote a letter to the Corinthians. He's one of the apostolic fathers that's even mentioned by Paul in one of his letters. Some think Apollos. And so who knows? We really don't know. Some think that Luke may have wrote it down for Paul as he, dictated it. But anyway, didn't mean to get carried away on the authorship of the book of Hebrews. But Oecumenius did write commentaries on all those. And he also wrote a commentary on the Acts of the Apostles. The only ones that he didn't write, as far as the New Testament goes, the only ones he didn't write commentaries for is the four Gospels. But anyway, this translation, this book that just had published, is now in print. It's now in Kindle. And like I said, it's free on archive. You can see it here on Amazon, and it's just released. Now notice how cheap that I put this book. I've got it for $6.99. So you can buy it for $6.99 in print. You can buy it in Kindle for the same price. Now, if you are a member of Kindle Unlimited, you can get it for free. But you can also, like I said, get it for free on my archive.org. I will put links in the description box so that you can click on either Amazon if you want to order it, or you can get the free edition on archive. It's up to you. Obviously, since I put all my published works on archive.org for free, I'm not in it for the money. And if I was in making translations of Bible commentaries, if I was actually in it for the money, I wouldn't be very ambitious on making money, because there's just a small niche of people that are into this types of works from the early church fathers. Now, granted, there are a lot of people that are interested in the early church fathers, and they do collect them, and they do it very passionately. But that's just, like I said, it's a small niche when you can compare it to everybody else. But those who are into this love the early church fathers. The early church fathers, there's libraries upon libraries upon libraries of writings from the ancient Christians that go all the way back to the times of the apostles. You know, we know that some of the apostles wrote writings, they wrote letters, they wrote, different types of writings for the New Testament, just like the Gospels. The apostle Matthew and the apostle John wrote Gospels. Now, some of their co-workers who were not apostles, Mark and Luke, they also wrote Gospel accounts. Then we do know that Paul's epistles, he's considered one of the apostles. He wrote quite a few letters. In fact, he probably wrote the most. If you count the book of Hebrews, he probably wrote the most content for the New Testament. Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, and Philemon is what Paul wrote. And again, if he wrote Hebrews, Hebrews is a pretty large letter that was written. But and then you get in after Paul's epistles, then that's where you run into the what's called the Catholic epistles or the general epistles. James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and Jude. And the reason why they're called Catholic or general is because these were letters that were written for all Christians and for all people. Whereas Paul's epistles were written specifically for either certain churches or certain individuals. You know, he wrote to the church in Rome, also a couple letters to those in Corinth, and then he wrote to individual people like Timothy, and so on. So that's what distinguishes between the general epistles and Paul's epistles. Then the book of Revelation is a whole different ballgame. That's apocalyptic literature. And the Acts of the Apostles, written by Luke. And Luke, he wrote that. It was basically the history of the early church, right after the resurrection and ascension of Jesus. And, he writes about the day of Pentecost, and then goes and talks about where Paul went. Now, there is one writing that's could possibly have been written by Mark. And I've talked about this before in one of my other videos. And to me, it's very intriguing. It's not in the Bible, but it's called the Acts of Barnabas. And basically, what it looks like, where Luke wrote the book of Acts, and Luke wrote mostly about the journeys and the missionary work by the Apostle Paul. It appears that Mark wrote something very similar. And so instead of following what Paul did, he followed what Barnabas did. Because in the book of Acts, there's a scene where Paul and Barnabas actually split up, and it was over Mark. Paul got mad at Mark, and so Barnabas, being either Mark's cousin or uncle, he loved Mark, and so Mark went with Barnabas, and so Mark wrote about their missionary work that they did after the split of Paul and Barnabas, which is very interesting. I've researched this, the Acts of Barnabas, and it really seems to be legit because all the locations and everything match up. And so I really think it's worth checking out. But anyway, that's besides the point. Getting back to my commentary here. This is an English translation of a commentary from the 6th and 7th century by an early church father by the name of Oecumenius. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and read the book overview that I put on Amazon. It says, Oecumenius is a Greek church father who was from the 6th and 7th century who wrote commentaries on most of the New Testament, the book of Acts, Paul's epistles, the Catholic epistles, and the book of Revelation. It has been thought for a long time that Oecumenius was bishop of Trica in ancient Thessaly. Others think he was a layperson from Isauria in Asia Minor. Until this English translation of his commentary on the Epistle of James, the only other English translation of a commentary by Oecumenius is his commentary on the book of Revelation. I have plans to translate as many of his commentaries as I can, Lord willing. His commentary style varies throughout all his works. In the Acts of the Apostles, he relied heavily upon John Chrysostom. In his commentaries on the epistles of Paul, he took the role as a compiler of quotes from various earlier commentators, and his commentaries were in the manner of a catena. His commentaries on the Catholic epistles are in the manner of an ordinary commentary, but he did, as did most early church fathers, relied upon the noble tradition of preserving the exegesis of their predecessors. The commentary on the Epistle of James by Oecumenius is a straightforward exposition on the scripture text and is most often very satisfying to the reader who is seeking to understand the meaning of each passage. He is never long-winded, and he is very clear and concise in his explanations, but he gives the readers what they want. He is very well-rounded in his interpretations, and he preserves the traditional insights that were left to us from other great church fathers like Chrysostom, Basil, Cyril, and so on. Oecumenius has the knack of knowing how to excerpt and draw from others by omitting just enough in order to give a very satisfying explanation without the long and drawn-out explanations that can wear out a reader who just wants to get to the meat and potatoes of the meaning of the scripture text. The English translation of this commentary by Oecumenius on the Epistle of James comes from the Patrologia Graeca, volume 118. So that's the overview of the book. I may make an audio version of this commentary because it is a good teaching. It's an excellent commentary. Oecumenius' commentary on the book of Revelation, I remember 20 years ago buying it and reading it, and I fell in love with Oecumenius right then and there because he just does a phenomenal job of explaining the meaning of Scripture. It's it's just straightforward. There's a lot of early church fathers, like I said in this book overview. Sometimes they get very long-winded, and they go through, instead of just coming straight out and telling you what the meaning of the Scripture is. A lot of times they'll start telling you all the different ways not to interpret it, and so by the time they get to the point, with some of them, you just get wore out. And that's what I love about Oecumenius. He's just straightforward, straight to the point, and does a great job. There's another from the Latin Church, another one that wrote commentaries on the epistles of Paul, called Ambrosiaster. And he's actually kind of like Oecumenius in a way. There's uncertainty about who he really was. But he's got a similar style as Oecumenius. They're both very similar, even though Ambrosiaster came from the Latin Church. Oecumenius is from the Greek Church. They both had similar styles. They're straight to the point, and they just do a phenomenal job of interpreting Scripture. And I actually did a translation of one of the works of Ambrosiaster called Questions and Answers on the Old and New Testaments. And I've got it on Amazon as well, and also on my archive.org account, where you can actually access it for free. And it's basically almost kind of like commentary, but it's a question and answers format that Ambrosiaster did. And so, I published that one somewhere within the last 10 years. Very proud of that one. Very happy that because there was not an English translation of that work, and it's very large, and there's no other English translation of it, so it's a first time English translation. That's what I've always tried to do. There are some commentaries of the early church fathers that had been translated prior that I published. Some of those were actually, most of those that were already done before were translations that people had made, and so I published their commentaries for them. Just like a man by the name of Robin McGregor years ago translated a couple of Bible commentaries from St. Jerome, one on Jonah and the other on Ecclesiastes. And so I published those for him. There's also a translation of the homilies of Gregory and Nyssa on the book of Ecclesiastes that I published for him. And there's also a work by Gregory the Great. It's a humongous commentary on the book of Job, and that was published by somebody else that I put into print and published. So I've done some of that. Also, there's a commentary by Victorinus. It's the very first commentary written on the book of Revelation, and there was a man that translated that, and I published it for him. So I've not only done some translation work myself, I've published certain translations for other people. Also, I hired a guy to translate a Katina, a Greek Katina, on the book of Galatians. It comes from Kramer's Katina, and very proud of that one. And Bill Berg is his name, and so I published that for him. And then I also hired a translator to translate a couple of Glossa Ordinaria, which the Glossa Ordinaria is very similar to these commentaries of the early church fathers, except that it was basically like a study Bible. It was basically a medieval study Bible where it presents the scripture text like in the middle of the page, and then around the scripture text in what's called glosses, basically like footnotes. They're little excerpts of commentary around the scripture text that give the meaning of the text. And so I've always been very fascinated. I'm really considering doing another translation of one of the books. In fact, I was getting ready to do it, but I decided to go ahead and just try to finish up Oecumenius' commentaries on the Catholic epistles before I do that. But at some point I plan on getting back to the Glossa Ordinaria. But anyway, I hired a translator, Sarah Vanderpost, to translate the Glossa Ordinaria on the book of Revelation, and also on the epistles of John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. And years ago, I did a translation on the Glossa Ordinaria on the book of Jonah. And so, you know, I've got a lot of works that I've done over the years, a lot of books that I've published. At least, I haven't even counted them up, but I know that I've got at least 25 books that I've published within the last 12 years. And again, I've made them all available for free on my archive.org. And in fact, if you're not familiar with archive.org, I recommend everybody to check out that awesome library. And a lot of books, there's a lot of books on archive.org that you will not find anywhere else because they've been out of print for years and years and years. I mean, I'm talking about books that go back centuries and centuries, very old. And you won't find them anywhere else, maybe in museums. But there's a lot of books that the powers that be, that I've actually written 3 books on, the Illuminati, they don't want you to read. And they've been doing everything they can to sabotage this website of archive.org. There's so many awesome books that are available on there for free that you've got to check out. Archive.org, the greatest library there is right now. And the Illuminati, the powers that be, are trying every way in the world to burn that library down, just like the destruction of the Library of Alexandria. That's what they're trying to do online to archive.org. And it's like, archive.org is like the Library of Alexandria. I mean, it's just loaded with just priceless books that you can access for free. And you can, there's no limit to how much you can learn from archive.org. And again, I've got all my books on there. It's under the name of John Literal. I'll leave a link to that in the description box so you can check it out. And explore archive.org. And I've found books on there that, in fact, that's what I'm using. I'm using archive.org, and I'm translating from the commentary on Oecumenius from archive.org. So I'm translating directly from that. And so It's priceless to me. That website's priceless to so many other people who are researchers, and I consider myself a researcher. And so I guess I'll go ahead and end the video here. Like I said, I'll leave links. For those of you who are outside of the United States that are listening to my videos, you can find my books on Amazon.com for whatever country you order from Amazon at. Just type in my name, John Littoral, and my books will show up. Now, this being a brand new book that just got published early this morning on this translation I did from Oecumenius, you may have to search just a little bit for that because it just got put on there, and sometimes new books they don't pop right up in the search engine. So I'll leave links to that. Again, I'm not in this for the money. So whether you read the book, however you read it, doesn't matter to me. I've just made it available for everybody. I don't make much money off royalties on my books. So, it would be nice as many people as possible, purchase my book. I mean, I'm not making hardly anything off of it. But it does help, it does help motivate me to, when I know that people are actually reading my content, that does give me some encouragement. But, like I said, I realize this is something that's a small niche. And so if you know somebody that studies the Bible, or if somebody's in the ministry that teaches and preaches and stuff, and they like researching the Bible, this would make a great gift for them. It'd be a very cheap, good gift. This commentary and any of my works, any of my translations, or any of the books that I've published, all my stuff is put at the lowest price that I can possibly put it. So my works are really good for people who like to study the Bible. And if you like studying the Illuminati, well, I've got 3 books that I'm very proud of that I've written. And if you want to learn about who really runs the world and who they are and how they work and what their agendas are and stuff, well, I've got 3 books on that will give you lots of information. And again, you're not going to find them for a better price than what I put. Even the books that I've sold, I've like my Illuminati playbook, large book, $20. And, you got to try to buy anything similar to that with that much content, with that much research behind it, you're going to spend a lot more. And again, I provided even that for free. So everything that I've ever written is for free on my archive.org. And so I'll leave links to my archive.org. Check it out. Folks, I appreciate you all. Take care and have a good day.